Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my channel, Fluent Pro Hug.
Hi, I'm Alina. I grew up in a small town where English wasn't really a part of my life. I could read and understand some words, but speaking, that was a nightmare. Every time I tried, I felt like my tongue was tied in knots. People would laugh, and I'd feel embarrassed. But everything changed when I got the chance to visit England. I was excited, but also terrified. How would I manage with my poor English? This is the story of how I went from stuttering to speaking like a native in just 1 month. Chapter 1. The beginning of the journey. When I first landed in England, I could feel my heart race with excitement. The city of London was alive, and I couldn't wait to explore. But deep down, I was terrified. What if they can't understand me? What if I mess up? I thought. I had always known that my English was not great, but now I was in a country where everyone spoke it fluently. The first challenge hit me as soon as I passed through immigration. The officer asked, "What's the purpose of your visit?" My mind went blank. I had practiced in my head for days. I am a tourist. I want to see the city. But when it came time to speak, the words just wouldn't come out. I mumbled, "I visit tourist." The officer raised an eyebrow but let me through. As I left the airport, I felt the weight of the language barrier. I couldn't even have a simple conversation with anyone. I need to change this. I can't let fear control me, I told myself. That night, I took out my notebook and wrote, "Learn to speak fluent English in 1 month." It felt like a huge task, but it was a goal I was willing to fight for. Chapter 2. Small steps, big changes. The next morning, I decided to take baby steps. I needed to start somewhere, and I knew the best way was to practice in real life. So, I headed to a nearby cafe. The barista greeted me and asked, "What can I get you today?" My heart raced. I had no idea what to say. I pointed to the menu and nervously said, "Coffee, please." She smiled and nodded, but I felt a little embarrassed. I was sure my pronunciation wasn't great, but I was proud I had tried. I decided to go back to the same cafe every morning. Over the next few days, I worked up the courage to say more than just "Coffee, please." One day, I said, "Can I have a cup of coffee, please?" The barista smiled and said, "Of course you're getting better." That was the first real encouragement I had received. Slowly but surely, I was improving. Chapter 3. Immersion is key. I knew the best way to learn was through immersion, so I started listening to English podcasts and audiobooks. At first, it was overwhelming. The speed at which the speakers talked made me feel like I was drowning in words. But I didn't give up. I repeated phrases aloud, paused the recordings to look up new words, and even wrote them down in my notebook. Words like adventure, opportunity, and embrace became a part of my daily vocabulary. At night, I would watch English TV shows with subtitles. Friends became my favorite because the dialogues were simple and the situations were relatable. I would pause after every line and repeat it aloud, trying to copy the pronunciation, tone, and emotion. In the beginning, it felt strange. I wasn't just watching TV. I was actively participating. But soon enough, I began to recognize the words faster, and my confidence grew. Chapter 4. Facing my fears. As the days passed, I became more and more determined. One day, I found a local conversation group that met every evening at the community library. I hesitated at first. What if I embarrassed myself? What if they all spoke better English than I did? but I had to push through my fear. I walked into the group room and there were a few people already seated. A woman named Margaret greeted me. She smiled and said, "Welcome, Alina. We're so happy to have you here." That smile made all the difference. My nerves calmed a little. When it was my turn to speak, I introduced myself. "Hello, my name is Alina. I'm from India. I'm learning English." My voice was shaky, but I got through it. The group clapped and encouraged me, which helped me feel less self-conscious. Every evening, I attended the group sessions. At first, I spoke very little. I would listen intently and try to repeat what others said. But as time passed, I started contributing more. One evening, a member asked me, "What do you do in your free time?" I had no idea how to answer at first, but then I remembered a sentence from the podcast I had listened to earlier in the day. "In my free time, I like to go for walks." I repeated the sentence, and everyone nodded, impressed by my effort. Chapter 5. Pushing myself further. Around the third week, I felt a change. I wasn't just practicing English, I was living it. I started speaking without hesitation. I had conversations with shopkeepers, asked for directions, and even chatted with locals in the park. One afternoon, I had a breakthrough. While walking in a local park, I saw a group of people playing football. I had always been a huge fan of the game, so I approached them. "Can I join?" I asked. They nodded, and soon we were all running around, laughing and talking in English. After the game, we sat on the grass, chatting about our favorite football teams. For the first time, I didn't feel nervous. My English wasn't perfect, but I was communicating. That evening, I went home and smiled to myself. I'm getting good at this, I thought. I began to realize that language wasn't just about vocabulary and grammar. It was about connection. The more I tried, the more I connected with people. Chapter 6. The Final Push. By the fourth week, I felt confident enough to give a presentation in the conversation group. The topic was simple: my first month in England. I prepared for days, rehearsing every sentence, checking the pronunciation, and writing out my ideas. When the day came, I was nervous, but I stood tall and began speaking. I arrived in England 4 weeks ago. I was nervous because my English was not good, but now I can speak with people, I can ask for directions, and I feel confident. I have learned so much. I stumbled over a few words, but I didn't stop. The group applauded at the end, and Margaret said, "Alina, you've come so far. We're all so proud of you." Chapter 7. The Transformation. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. A month ago, I couldn't speak a sentence without hesitation. Now I could hold conversations, ask for help, and make friends. The fear that once held me back had turned into the confidence I needed to succeed. As I boarded the flight back to India, I thought about my journey. I had learned more than just a language. I had learned the power of persistence, practice, and the willingness to fail. Learning a language isn't easy, I thought, but if I can do it, so can anyone. Chapter 8. Immersing in Everyday Life. As the days passed, I became more accustomed to the rhythm of life in England. I started noticing how English was everywhere, on signs, in shops, on the bus, and in casual conversations. At first, I couldn't understand half of it, but as I spent more time around people, I began to pick up bits and pieces. I could recognize words I didn't know before and started to understand them in context. It wasn't just about memorizing vocabulary anymore. It was about feeling the language. One morning, while taking the bus to a local market, I overheard a conversation between two people. They were talking about a new movie coming out. They said something like, "The plot is fantastic, but the acting is a bit flat." I had no idea what flat meant in this context, but I knew it had something to do with being boring. I pulled out my phone and looked it up. Flat means dull or lacking excitement. The next day, I made sure to use it in my own conversation. When I was talking to Margaret at the conversation group, I mentioned, "I watched a movie last night. The plot was good, but I thought the acting was a little flat." Margaret smiled and said, "Great use of new words, Arav. It's important to add variety to your vocabulary." Chapter 9. The Local Experience. I was beginning to feel more at home in this foreign land, but even though I had gained some confidence, there were moments when the language barrier still felt overwhelming. One evening, I decided to attend a local event, a street food festival. It was crowded, with people from all over the world. As I wandered through the stalls, I saw a group of people at a taco stand, speaking quickly in English. I walked up and smiled nervously. The vendor asked me, "What can I get you, mate?" My heart raced. I didn't know what to say. I had never ordered food in a place like this before, and the pace of the conversation was much faster than I was used to. "I'll have tacos," I stammered. "What toppings do you recommend?" The vendor quickly rattled off a list of options. I caught only a few words: cheese, salsa, guacamole. I nodded and said, "I'll have everything, please." As I ate my tacos and sat on the grass, I reflected on the experience. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. I had engaged in a conversation with someone and had managed to understand them, even if I missed a few details. I was starting to see the progress, and that kept me going. Chapter 10. Overcoming Doubts. But even with all my progress, there were moments of doubt. I remember one particular night when I was walking back from the market. I saw a group of teenagers hanging out near the park. They were talking and laughing, and I wanted to join in, but I was afraid I wouldn't fit in. What if they laughed at my accent or my mistakes? What if I said something wrong and they didn't understand me? For a moment, I considered walking away, but something inside me said, "No, you've come this far. You can do this." I took a deep breath and walked over. "Hey, do you mind if I join you?" I asked. The group looked at me for a moment, and then one of the girls smiled and said, "Sure, come sit." I sat down, and we started talking about the weather, our favorite music, and movies. At first, I struggled with some words, but they were patient with me. When I said something wrong, they would kindly correct me. One of the guys said, "It's okay, mate. You're doing great." That was a turning point for me. I realized that the fear of making mistakes was holding me back more than anything else. People weren't judging me. They were just happy to have a conversation. From that moment on, I stopped worrying about every little mistake. I focused on speaking and improving. Chapter 11. Practicing with Purpose. As the days went on, I started to practice more intentionally. I realized that just talking to people wasn't enough. I needed a structured approach to improving my English. So, I began setting small, daily goals. Every morning, I would write down 5 new words or phrases that I had encountered the day before. I would then use them in sentences and try to speak them out loud as much as possible. I also started recording myself, speaking, listening to the playback, and identifying areas where I could improve. One of the biggest challenges was pronunciation. I had a strong accent, and it made some words hard to understand. I remember one day I was trying to say the word comfortable, but it came out as comfortably. A local friend, Sarah, gently corrected me and said, "It's comfortable. Don't stress too much on the syllables. Just relax your mouth." I practiced in front of the mirror every day. Slowly, my accent became less of a barrier, and I started to sound more natural. It was a huge win for me. Chapter 12. The Real Test. As my month in England was coming to an end, I knew I had made tremendous progress. But there was still one thing that made me nervous: the real test. I had to speak with a native speaker who wasn't as patient or understanding as the people I had been practicing with. One afternoon, I visited a popular bookstore in the city center. The place was filled with people browsing, and I was excited to find a new book to read. As I picked up a novel, an older man approached me. He was the store owner, and he smiled as he said, "Looking for something specific?" I took a deep breath. "I'm looking for a book about English history." I said it slowly, making sure I got the words right. He raised an eyebrow, and I worried that I had said something wrong. But then he smiled and said, "Ah, good choice. We've got a few here. Follow me." We walked together to the history section, chatting along the way. I was amazed at how naturally the conversation flowed. We talked about history, about books, and about life in England. There were moments when I had to ask him to repeat himself, but he was kind and didn't seem frustrated at all. At the end of the conversation, I couldn't help but feel proud of myself. This was it, the real test, and I had passed it. I had been able to communicate, connect, and express myself in a way I hadn't thought possible just a month ago. Chapter 13. Reflection and Gratitude. As my time in England drew to a close, I sat down to reflect on everything I had learned. I had come to this country with a fear of speaking English, but now I was leaving with confidence. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about trying, learning, and improving every day. I thought back to the first day I arrived in England, nervous and unsure of myself. I thought about the embarrassing moments, the awkward silences, the mistakes, and the doubts. But I also thought about the victories, the small moments of success, like ordering food at the cafe, having a real conversation with someone, and understanding a new phrase. As I boarded my flight back home, I knew that I was leaving with more than just a language skill. I was leaving with a new mindset, a belief in myself and my ability to learn and grow. I had learned not just English, but also the power of persistence, the importance of making mistakes, and the value of practice. So, to anyone who is struggling to learn English, or any language for that matter, remember this: you don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep going, keep practicing, keep making mistakes, and keep pushing yourself. With time, it all pays off. If I can do it, so can you.